In this course, I'm going to focus on the following issues. So we are going to address morphology. It's the fifth part. And we are going to have a focus mainly on the following aspects. So we are going to define what is morphology, what is a morpheme, types of morphemes, and then we are going to have a look at the different processes of morphological patterns, and then explain what do we mean by allomorphs, and then we will have a conclusion or a summary of everything we have seen together. So let's start with the definition. Now, if you look at the word morphology, literally, this term means the study of forms. Now, when we say it studies forms, we need to explain what do we mean by forms. Forms here, or morphology, focuses mainly on an analysis. It is an analysis of the basic, smallest elements used in a language. Those smallest elements are called morphemes, okay? So morphology studies morphemes, and if we want to specify what do we mean by morphemes, morphemes are the smallest units of meaning that cannot be subdivided further into other words. Now, if you look at the following examples that we have here, we have chain, we have fat, we have ER, and we have S. Now, if you look at these four examples, all of them can be regarded or are regarded as morphemes. If you look at the first example, chain, it has a meaning. Fat, you know what it means. Somebody is fat, which means has weight. Also, we have ER. It has meaning, but though it's a morpheme that cannot stand alone. And also we have here S, which is also another morpheme which indicates the plural aspects of a specific word when it is added to a specific word. Now, if we gather the word, if we combine chain with S, we will get chains, which means it is the plural form of the word chain. And if we combine the word fat with ER, we say fatter in order to indicate comparative aspects. Now, let's have a look at these following words. How many morphemes do we have in these words? Now, let's start with the first one. The first one is sending. Sending or tempting. I have a different word here. I just recognized this. But anyway, we have the word sending. If we want to split this word into syllables, into how many morphemes it contains, then we can say it has the word tempt and ing, or send and then ing. So it has two morphemes. Look at the word fog. Fog has only one morpheme, so it cannot be subdivided into more than one. If you look at the word dogs, dogs has two morphemes. We have cat and we have S. S is another morpheme, so we have here two morphemes. And then we have also players. How many morphemes do you think we have here? Okay? So yes, we have three morphemes. The first morpheme is play. The second morpheme is ER. And the third morpheme is the S. So ER indicates a person who plays football, tennis. And the S, the morpheme S, indicates a plural form. Okay? Now, let's move on to types of morphemes. How many types of morphemes we have? Of course, now if we go back to the examples we had a look at here, you can recognize that the words that we use or the morphemes that we use are not similar. So let's have a look. We have two different types of morphemes. The first one We call them free morphemes. And free morphemes, these are morphemes or words which can stand alone. They have meaning. They have meaning by themselves. But bound morphemes, and you can get it from the meaning of the word bound, it means that they cannot stand alone. They need another word. They need to be combined with another affix. Either it is a prefix or an affix in general, so they need to be combined with another stem word in order to have meaning. Let's have a look at these. We have the word singer, okay? We have the word claimed, and the last word is grateful. Now, let's start with the word singer or jumper. Now, the word jump is a free morpheme, which means that jump by itself it has meaning as a word. It can stand alone. ER, jumper, singer, the ER at the end of these two words cannot stand alone. So it needs another root word. It needs another word in order to have meaning. So ER is a bound morpheme. Let's have a look at claimed. We have the word claim and we have ED. Claim is a free morpheme, but ED is a bound morpheme. Let's look at grateful. We have the word great. It is a free morpheme, but full, grateful, the full at the end is a bound morpheme. Let's explain this in more examples. The word undressed and the word carelessness. Undressed can be divided into three morphemes. The first one is un. This is a prefix. The second one is dress, and this is the stem or the root of the word. And the last one is ed, and this is a suffix. Now for un, the first one is a bound morpheme. Dress is a free morpheme. And the ed at the end of the word undressed, it is a bound morpheme. Let's look at carelessness. We have also here, we have three different morphemes. Care is the stem, and it is a free morpheme. Less is a suffix. So less is a suffix. Normally we need also a dash before less, so I forgot to do this. So there we need a dash before less and after less. So it is a suffix and it is a bound morpheme. And the last morpheme is ness. It is a suffix and it is also a bound morpheme because it doesn't stand alone. Okay, so here we are looking at affixes. Now, if we look at affixes as we have seen in the previous examples, we have seen that all affixes are regarded bound morphemes, which means that they are not lexical categories. Lexical categories are nouns, verbs, and adjectives. Now, affixes, we have here some examples: un, in, and the s, and full. Now, how do we classify and draw a morphological tree? Now, we have here an example. Look at the example below. We have, for example, unkind. If you look at the word unkind, unkind can be subdivided into two morphemes. The first morpheme, which is un, is a bound morpheme. Now, it is a bound morpheme, and its nature, its category, it is an affix. The second one is kind, and its category or function, it is an adjective. It functions as an adjective. Now, when we combine both the affix and the adjective, what do we get? Unkind. When we have kind, it is an adjective. When we add un, it stays like an adjective. So, and this is how we classify morphologically and draw a morphological tree. Now let's move on to the second example, which is remove. We have two morphological, morphemes, if you can say. The first one is re, the second morpheme is move. Now, re is an affix, move is an adjective, is a verb. So sorry, I need to change this. So move is a verb. Now, if I join, so this needs to be corrected. I'm sorry for this. So if we move to from the word move, which is a verb, into remove, the word stays a verb, so it doesn't change its category. Let's move on to another example. We have here rapidly and we have happiness. So please, you can start doing it before you have a look if you like. Now we have rapid, which is an adjective, and li, which indicates an affix. Now, when we combine the two words rapidly, it becomes an adverb. And I would like you to focus here and see that we have moved from an adjective into an adverb, which means that there is a change of the category of the word. The same will happen for the word happiness. Happy is an adjective. When we add ness, it becomes a noun. So there is these two suffixes, ness and li, they change the category of the word from an adjective into a noun and from an adjective into an adverb. Now, in this example, these are other exercises. So let's do softened and pens. And at home, you will do grateful and planes. Now, let's start with the word pens, books, computers. So all these words, how can we draw a morphological tree for them? Now, if you take the word book, book is a noun. If you add s, it stays a noun. So there is no change in the category. The s, the affix s, it changes the grammatical. It indicates the plural aspects of the word. Now, if you move on to softened, we have, in this word, we have three morphemes. The first one is soft, which is an adjective. To soften, now, en, when we add it, at the end of a root, the word becomes a verb, which means that soften becomes a verb. And then when we add ed, it is an affix and it stays a verb. So soften, we have moved from soft, which is an adjective, into a verb, soften, into another verb, soften. Now the ed indicates the past form. Okay, so let's recapitulate on the types of morphemes. So we said that there are free morphemes, they occur alone. Example again, bad, so it's a free morpheme. And there are bound morphemes, which does not or are not free morphemes. They must occur with another morpheme. They must be combined with other morphemes. Now, let's see what types of bound morphemes do we have. Now, let's have a look. We have, for example, the word tourists. Look at the example. The word tourists can be divided into three morphemes. The first morpheme is tourist, okay, is tour. The second is ist, and the third is the s at the end. Now, ist in the first example can be called as a derivational bound morpheme. So it is derivational. When we add the word ist to tour, it changes the meaning, okay? Just by adding the word ist or the affix ist, we change the meaning of what we want to say. A tour does not mean a tourist. A tourist refers to the person who goes into other places and visits other places. Okay, so derivational bound morphemes, the main characteristics of derivational morphemes is that they change the meaning. They change the meaning, but they are still considered as bound morphemes. They need another stem. Another type of bound morphemes is inflectional morphemes. Now, inflectional morphemes like, and we can see it in the S at the end of tourists. Now, the S, what does it indicate? It indicates the plural form of the word. We are not talking about one tourist, but we are talking about many tourists. So this is, moving from tourist with no S into tourists with S, we change the grammatical function. Okay? So we change the grammatical function. Now, when we change the grammatical function, we are talking about inflection. إعراب, inflection. When we are changing the meaning of the word, we are talking about derivation, الاشتقاق. Okay? Now, in this table, I already gave you this table as an exercise, and you've done a great job answering and completing the chart. Now, we have here the different types of morphemes. We have three morphemes, which can be subdivided into lexical morphemes and functional morphemes. And also we have bound morphemes, which are subdivided into derivational and inflectional morphemes. We will discuss this, in details, in the coming details after this slide, and I will be back to the chart, okay? But in any case, you can have a look at the chart and correct the exercise that I gave you in the Facebook group. Now here, I have already given you this as a practice exercise in order to prepare for the chapter of morphology. Now, if you have a look here, we are indicating what type of words are these. For example, the sentence, the child's wildness shocked the teacher. The child, and we have the S, wildness, shock, ed, the, teach, er. We need to break up the sentence into the smallest units that exist in that sentence. Now, the smallest units, if you have a look at the third column here, which is the S, the possessive form here, it is also considered as a morpheme. And what type of morpheme is it? It is inflectional. The is functional, child is lexical, the S, the possessive S, is inflectional, wild is lexical, ness is derivational, shock is lexical, ed inflectional, and the is functional, and teach lexical, and then er is derivational. Now, we need to know more about what is the difference between all these different types of morphemes. Now, if you look at the last column or the last line of this chart here, lexical morphemes are described as open class words, as they carry the content of words we convey. So, what kind of words can be considered as lexical, or what kind of morphemes can be considered as lexical morphemes? We talk mainly of nouns, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs. So all the words that have a category such as a noun, an adjective, a verb, or an adverb, we consider them as lexical. Now, what about functional morphemes? What do we mean by functional? Now, functional, we have categories like conjunctions, prepositions, and articles and pronouns. Examples like but, when, on, over, near, then. So these are closed class of words. Now, what about bound morphemes? Bound morphemes, we have the first type, which is derivational morphemes. And derivational morphemes are all the suffixes and prefixes that exist in English, and we call them or affixes as well. And we will have a look even at infixes. Some examples of infixes can be considered also as morphemes. The last type of morphemes is inflectional morpheme. Now, inflectional morpheme or grammatical morphemes, these are morphemes which indicate an aspect of grammar, an aspect of tense. For example, like plural, the singular s, the tense, comparative, and the possessive form. So usually these morphemes, inflectional morphemes, they do not produce new words. Okay? They do not produce new words, but they indicate aspects of grammar function of a word in the language. Okay, now let's move on to processes of morphological pattern. And we are going to speak mainly about 5 different processes. Derivational morphemes, and we need to see how they are different from inflectional morphemes, and then we will have a look at internal change, suppletion, and then by the end we are going to have a look at stress. Derivational morphemes. Now, derivational morphemes, they indicate affixes, an affix which forms a word with a different category from the root base. Let's clarify this using an example. We have the example of sing, singer. Now, when we move on from the word sing, which is a verb, into the word singer, which becomes a noun, then we can say that the ER that we have added, the affix that we have added to the root sing, is a derivational morpheme. Why? Because simply we have created a new word. We have moved from a verb into a noun. Not only this, but we have also created a new meaning of the word, because you know that sing is an action in itself, but the singer, it refers to the person who sings. Another example, so you can see that verb plus ER, we have a noun, it becomes a noun. Now, if we look at the word monotonous, monotony, when we add us, it becomes monotonous, which means that we can move from a noun. If we add us, we can move from a noun into an adjective by adding a derivational morpheme. So us is a derivational morpheme. Let's have a look at inflectional morphemes. Now, generally, inflectional morphemes are affixes that do not change the category of the words. The word stays, if it is a verb, it stays a verb. If it is, for example, if we add the word to the word or to the verb read an S, it stays a verb. But what does change here? What is the change that happens here? The change is only in inflection. It is in grammar, which means that when we add the S, it indicates a third person singular. Also, the same can be done with the morpheme ing. So the affix ing, when it is added to the word read, it becomes reading. Now, there is no change of the category of the word. We have stayed or moved from a verb which is read into a verb which is reading. But both read and reading are different only in terms of inflection, which means in terms of tense, which means that an action is taken a longer time when you say I read and I am reading. Reading, it means it takes a longer time. So it's the continuous aspect of the verb. Some affixes have properties of inflection, of inflectional affixes, but others are derivational affixes. So we need to distinguish really between affixes that indicate inflection and other affixes which indicate derivation. And we will have a look at it by the end of this course. I'll provide a summary which gathers all these information. The third process, the third morphological process, is internal change. So what do we mean by internal change? Now, if you have observed, I mean, in the previous examples, we are combining words. For example, if you want to make a new word, you can combine using affixes. Affixes can be situated at the beginning of the stem, at the end of the stem. But how about changes which happen at the inside, at the internal or at the middle of the root, okay? And we have such examples. So usually internal change, it is considered as non-concatenative morphology, and I invite you to search more on this notion. So sometimes morphology is not shown through, so sorry, there's a mistake there, through a simplistic combination of roots and affixes. What do we mean by this? Which means that when we talk about internal change as a process, we are talking about a complex change of the morpheme. There is a complex change of the morpheme. We do not combine two morphemes together in a simplistic way. I mean, you just combine them and that's it. No, but you change from the internal aspect or from the internal aspect of the word or the morpheme. So many English words owe their morphological patterning, and patterning here we mean organization, ordering. How do we combine? How do we what kind of order the combination of words takes? What kind of process do we follow in order to, for example, to make a plural, to make or to indicate the past tense? What kind of order do we have? So usually this order, we know it. If I want to make the past tense, I say verb plus ed. So when you do this, we call them regular verbs, which means that it's a simple way to indicate the past tense. So ed is a inflectional morpheme. Okay. Now the same can happen with the plural form. When I go and say kid, kids. So what happens here? So it's a simple process. I go from kid, which is singular, into kids by adding the s at the end. So there is no change. But what happens when I say, for example, child, children? Now here we notice that there is a complete change from the word child into children, and we will have other examples. So the question that we need to ask here, why do we have some exceptions in English? Now, the main reason is that these exceptions exist because of historical influences and the effect of borrowed elements, which means that English has borrowed thoroughly from other languages, and mainly Latin and Greek language. Let's have a look at the following example. When you say, for example, man and man, man and man, we have an internal change. It's a non-concatenative change of the word, which means that we have changed the internal side or aspect of the word from the A into the E. So it is an exception from how do we usually indicate a plural form in English, which is just by adding s and you get the plural. I gave you also the example of child and children. Now, in order to move on from child into children, we have added ren. Now, from where does it come? I have no idea. So certainly it is the effect of other languages of borrowing. Now, eat and ate. Now, you see here what happened. Irregular verbs, there is a complete change. I mean, either in the beginning, in the order of words. So here we have a change in the order of the alphabet letters. So eat and ate. It indicates moving from the present tense into the past tense. Also think and thought. Okay, so these are examples of inflectional morphemes which undertake a certain process where there is a complex way of patterning and organizing. There is an internal change within the morpheme which happens. Okay. Another process, sometimes we don't have only this kind of internal change, but there is a complete suppletion, which means that in English we have some words which are completely new words. Let's have an example, which means that there is a complete change of the morpheme. If you go from the present into the past, for example, I am, and into the past you say was. So why is this? I mean, it means that it is a breach of the rule that we know about moving from the present into the past by adding the ed form, okay? And also the other root or the other rule of the internal change that we have just seen, like think and thought, okay? Again, we have another example, which is go and went. So this is an example which indicates that the morpheme completely changes. Now let's move on to the last morphological process, which is the stress. Now stress functions also as an invisible morpheme. So I would like you to focus on the word invisible morpheme. These are, we see these invisible morphemes mainly when we have homographs. Homographs are similar words. We write them in the same way. There is nothing in the word which indicates that this is a verb, this is a noun. Okay? The only clue that you have is to read the word within the context. This is the only way you can know that this is a verb or this is a noun. Let's have these examples. Now, for example, when you say conflict and when you say conflict, also content and content. Now, when you say content and you put the stress at the beginning, at the first syllable, at the beginning of the word, it's not the same like when you say to content yourself with being safe, staying at home, for example. I'm content, okay? Or the content of this course, of today's course, is morphology, which means it's the subject matter. So you see, we have changed the meaning from a noun, not only the meaning. So the meaning changes when we move on. From stress at the beginning and stress at the second syllable. And also, the category of the word changes, which means that we move from a noun into a verb. And you can have a look at the other examples there. The last point is morphs and allomorphs. So what do we mean by, so we have seen morphs and what do they mean? Now, what do we mean by allomorphs? Morphs are the actual forms used to realize morphemes, but allomorphs are variant forms of a morpheme. Now, allomorphs, they indicate variation. And what do we mean by variation? How do we For example, if we speak about here in the example, it shows you, the plural form. How do we make a plural form of the word cat into cats, and bus into buses? Okay. Now, if you move on, the way we do it, is a little bit different in terms of how we are going to change the S at the end of the noun word into S and easy. Okay. For example, you say a cat, cuts, and a bus, buses, which means the allomorphs, it indicates the sounds that we are going, or the ES and the S, the morphemes that we are going to have at the end of these two words. Okay, now we have come out to the last to the last two slides, sorry. Now here you see a kind of summary of what we have discussed so far. You will see again a tree which indicates the types of morphemes. We have free and bound, and then please follow reading this and you have indications and examples of each type of morpheme and what is included in each one. So I invite you to go and read this. And also I have provided you here with the summary again that explains the different types of morphemes, which are content word, function word, derivational morphemes, and inflectional morphemes. So I invite you again to have a look at those examples, have a look at the definitions of each one. Now, for next, inshallah, for the next course, we are going to have a look at syntax. So I invite you to start reading from now about the section. For those who are willing to present, present syntax, present this part, you're most welcome to record yourself in an audio or in a video and post it in the Facebook group. So that's all for today. Thank you so much. I will be happy to receive your questions and comments via the Facebook group. Stay safe and be positive. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala.